Story 1. Room 212. I never should have taken that job. A night shift security gig at the old Warren Hotel sounded easy enough. Sit behind a desk, keep an eye on the cameras, and occasionally patrol the halls. Seemed like the perfect way to kill time and make some money while I figured out my next move. My life was already a mess. My name's Jake, by the way. Lost my job last month, my girlfriend left me, and I needed a place to crash. The hotel even let me stay in one of their unused rooms, room 212. The first night felt normal enough. The place was old and smelled like mold, that faint odor of rot clinging to everything. You could practically taste the decay in the air. The carpets were stained and threadbare, and the walls creaked like they were alive. The cameras gave me a blurry view of the dimly lit hallways, which was more than fine with me. I didn't need to see much. I just needed to get through the night. It wasn't until my second shift that things started to feel off. Around 3 a.m., I caught something on the monitor, movement in one of the halls. I got up to check it out, dragging my tired body through the narrow, suffocating corridors. The air felt heavy, damp, like it was pressing in on me. When I reached the spot where I thought I saw someone, there was no one there. But I could hear something, a faint scraping sound, like nails on wood. As I turned to leave, the lights flickered, and suddenly, room 212's door creaked open. I had locked it earlier. I was sure of it. My heart pounded as I stepped closer. I could feel the cold air seeping out from the crack in the door, colder than it should have been. My skin prickled. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside. Everything in the room was exactly how I left it, except for one thing. A woman was sitting on the edge of the bed. I froze. She looked out of place. Dressed in an old-fashioned nightgown, her hair a tangled mess, her eyes vacant, staring at nothing. "Excuse me, miss?" My voice barely cracked through the silence. She turned her head slowly, painfully slowly, and her eyes locked on mine. She whispered, "He's coming." The room started to spin, and the walls seemed to close in. I backed out of the room, slamming the door behind me, but the sound echoed like a scream. The lights went out, and in the pitch-black darkness, I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps, coming from down the hall. I ran back to the lobby, the pounding footsteps chasing me the whole way. But when I looked at the monitors, all the cameras were static. Every single one, except for room 212. The screen flickered, and I saw myself on the monitor, staring into the camera, only I wasn't in the room anymore. I don't know who, or what, was walking around the hotel that night, but I left before sunrise. I never went back. I heard later that no one had been assigned to room 212 for years. They sealed it after something terrible happened. They never said what. But I don't think it's a coincidence that I ended up there. Story 2. The elevator. I was just trying to make a little extra cash. My name's Sarah, and I work as a travel blogger, but gigs have been slow, so when I got a freelance photography job to shoot a renovated, historic hotel, I jumped at it. The Ainsley Hotel. It was tucked away in some forgotten town, and when I first stepped inside, I could practically hear the whispers of its past echoing off the walls. The place was weird, not just old weird, but unsettling weird. The wallpaper was faded, curling at the edges like it was trying to escape the walls. The air smelled faintly of dust and something sweet, like rotting fruit. And the elevator? It was one of those ancient, clattering things with a gate you had to pull shut. It groaned every time it moved, like it didn't want to. My first day went fine. I got my shots, talked to the manager, who seemed like he hadn't slept in weeks, and took a few final photos before packing up for the night. I decided to take the elevator down from the top floor, even though it felt like a death trap. As soon as the gate clanged shut, I knew something was wrong. The elevator jerked, then stopped. Dead. I was stuck. I hit the emergency button, but it just clicked uselessly. My phone had no signal. That's when I heard it, a faint humming, coming from above me, growing louder. It wasn't just mechanical, it was musical, like someone was humming a lullaby. I strained to listen, and then, clear as day, a voice whispered, "Don't look up." I froze. I could feel my skin crawling, the hair on my arms standing on end. My mind screamed at me to look up, but I didn't. I kept staring at the elevator doors, praying they'd open. The humming got louder, closer, until it felt like it was inside the elevator with me. I couldn't breathe, my hands were shaking, and then, without warning, the elevator plummeted. It stopped just as suddenly. I was on the ground floor. I don't know how. I hadn't pressed any buttons. I practically threw myself out of the elevator and ran for the lobby. But when I got there, it wasn't the same lobby I had walked through earlier. It was older, darker. The air felt thick, stale. And there were people dressed in old-fashioned clothes, milling about like it was a normal day. But their faces, God, their faces, they were blank, empty. One of them turned to me, eyes hollow, and said, "You shouldn't have looked." I ran. I didn't care where, I just had to get out. But no matter where I went, every hallway, every door, led back to that elevator. That damn humming followed me. I never saw daylight again. I'm still here, somewhere in this hotel. But if you're reading this, for the love of God, don't look up. Story 3. The room that wasn't there. You ever book a room at a hotel and something just doesn't feel right? That was me. My name's Liam. My buddies and I were on a road trip, and we needed a cheap place to crash for the night. We found a small, rundown place called the Grandview Inn. It was cheap, it was close, and it had rooms available, so why not? The clerk seemed off from the moment we walked in. He wouldn't make eye contact, and his hands were shaking when he handed us the keys. He told us, "Stay out of room 309. We laughed it off, thinking it was some kind of joke. When we got to our room, 305, I immediately noticed something weird. There was no room 309. The numbers jumped from 308 to 310, like 309 didn't exist. My friend Mike thought it was hilarious and kept banging on the door of 310, pretending it was cursed or something. Around midnight, the weird stuff started. We heard a knock on the door, 3 loud, deliberate knocks. But when we opened it, no one was there. A minute later, it happened again. And then again. Only this time, when we opened the door, we saw it, room 309. The number was clear as day, gleaming in the dim hallway light. "Dude, what the hell?" Mike muttered, stepping closer. Against my better judgment, I followed. The door was slightly ajar, and the air around it felt wrong. Cold, like standing too close to a freezer. I reached out to push it open, but the door swung wide before I touched it. Inside, the room was empty, but it didn't feel empty. There was this smell, like burnt wood and wet earth. My skin crawled just standing in the doorway. Mike, of course, went right in, laughing and calling out, "Hello? Anybody home?" That's when the door slammed shut. I banged on it, shouting for him to open up, but all I could hear from inside was his voice, whispering, "It's not real. It's not real." The door flew open, and Mike stumbled out, eyes wide, face pale. "We have to go," he whispered. I didn't argue. We ran out of there, but the hallway seemed longer, like it stretched out forever. The lights flickered, and with each flicker, I could see something moving just out of the corner of my eye, dark, shadowy figures slipping through the walls. By the time we made it outside, Mike wasn't making any sense. He kept muttering about how the room wasn't there, how none of this was real. We left that night, drove straight through until morning. I've looked up the Grandview Inn since then, but every time I try to find it, it's like it doesn't exist. Like it was never there. Just like room 309.